I think a lot of therapists, including myself, love the engagement with people, love
Yeah.
contact with people, and putting a machine between the two of you is not as
Mm,
gratifying for the therapist,
yeah.
that interaction. And also, I'm not just an advocate of neurofeedback. When I try, when I see that something seems to be helpful, do the research. So we did 3 research projects
Yeah.
showing how effective neurofeedback is. And I've been disappointed that the world has not taken this on, because
Yeah.
even though it is not the most exciting treatment for the therapist to do, it can really help people to be focused and to be calm and to actually reflect on themselves.
Mm,
As you must know from if you were on medicine for ADHD, when you're all over the place, you cannot reflect on yourself.
yeah.
Uh, with the EEG, we can actually figure out what the brain waves are that keep you hyperactive, and we
Yeah.
can help to create different brainwave activities for people. Huh?
Yeah.
And that is not the same as the relationship. It clearly does something completely different from anything else, namely, it changes the circuitry of your brain regions.
Hmm.
I'm sure there's still a great future for it. I'm just waiting for somebody at UCLA or Stanford to really do the next piece of work.
What
Because
would that be?
it's helpful. But we need to really show uh, on a larger scale than we did how
Yeah.
neurofeedback really can help people to become calm and focused,
Yeah.
to reflect upon themselves, and to inhibit themselves, and to
Hmm.
be goal directed and change their capacity effective functioning. And another thing that I'd like to talk about these days as neuroscience is evolving is the salience network of the brain.
Hmm.
A big thing in trauma, that minor little things that other people may find irrelevant or mildly irritating, your salience network picks up as being extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
And other things that other people say, man, I better get out of here. Your salience network shuts down and you're unable to really take the warning signs. These are not cognitive things. These are
Mm,
things you get out of by therapy. And really, you need to rearrange how the brain perceives information.
hmm.
And I don't see a shortcut for that. I don't see other ways of doing it. I see the similar things on psychedelics, which is also
Mm,
complex. But what our research shows is that ordinary psychotherapy, talking, insight, understanding, doesn't seem to really shift those brain networks.
mm. So, what are all the things? So, you mentioned neurofeedback, psychedelics changes that particular network, the salient network.
It looks that way. Uh, we did some neuroimaging in our yoga studies also. The
Hmm.
sample was too small to have definite conclusions, but you
Hmm.
saw some changes in how people experience the sensory input from around them. I, in my own research, we have never had enough resources to spell this out, but I hope somebody out there is doing that because, to my mind, these are the big issues in trauma. Yeah.
So, how that would look for someone with trauma is they come in, they hear a noise, for example, like a moderate uh, noise, stressful noise, like a car honk,
Yeah.
and they would go.
Yeah.
And so after what you're describing as like some of the neurofeedback or yoga practices, asana practices, they were able to what? What shifted
Okay.
exactly?
But it changes if people say, oh, that car came awfully close.
Mm.
Oh, boy, that noise was really unpleasant.
Mm.
But there's this barrier between reacting.
Mm-hmm.
uh, uh, so you very much, it's interesting in my particular way. I learned about trauma at the same time that I had small babies at home.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always impressed how the traumatized people I treated were very much like babies. A little
Mm-hmm.
stimulus, catastrophe. And
Yeah.
with my infants and small children, I thought, they'll outgrow it, they'll get better.
Yeah.
And veterans who were 35, 40 years old reacted the same way as my babies did. Said, what are my babies going to learn so they will not react like this? And what happens to these veterans? That they have reactivity the way the babies have reactivity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a big difference. And it's interesting, yeah. I mean, do you feel like CBT even gets into some of that? I mean, I know that, and especially in this crowd, CBT might have some some hard feelings
You
towards,
know,
but
I think it all depends on how you define CBT. As you know,
yeah,
I tend to poke fun at CBT.
it is fun. But I mean,
But
some of like the exposure, some of the exposure work, which derives from more CBT orient, like where you're going, okay, we're gonna be with that noise, and then until the sort of adverse intensity of it, do, like,
desensitization, I've not been impressed with desensitization.
uh,
Uh, like, and I've not really seen good studies of it that indeed the brain changes in its way it perceives things. But um,
yeah. Well, what's interesting is like, I mean, at least when I was in school, they classified EMDR as a glorified desensitization practice, which I mean, that was even in the licensing exam, is that you had to put true or false basically if it's just glorified desensitization, and they clearly have a bias towards EMDR, against EMDR in the licensing boards. But
and that's really quite astounding, actually. That
yeah,
if you do EMDR and you see it regularly, and
yeah,
with the first research on it, NIH funded,
I know you did.
only NIH funded research, it's no, it's I think it integrates. And
Mm,
desensitization is very different from integrate. The same thing that we see on psychedelics, in psychedelics more explicitly, that people go back there, they feel the pain, they feel the horror, and they know
hmm
this happened to me back then when I was 18 years old, or it happened to me when I was 6 years old. And your mind seems to activate its timeline.
mm,
So, this happened back then, and it was awful, but it's not happening now.
yeah,
And that capacity is not something you can talk people into, it's
yeah,
something you mature into. Huh?
yeah, yeah. I mean, one of I think Peter Levine's like well-known lines in somatic experiencing is, and that was then, and this is now. And that was then, and like the sort of hypnotic practice of that was like finding an anchor of time
Yeah,
in the past and then an anchor in the present. And but I hear that's such a potency of psychedelics.
but see, your cognition knows that.
Yeah.
And so, to my mind, it's a little bit talking down to people when you say that.
Okay.
Because my reaction would be, I know. I feel stupid already for having these reactions.
Mm,
I know it was then and not now, but
yeah.
I can't convince that goddamn periaqueductal grain, that limbic system of mine, that it's over.
Mm,
My frontal lobe cannot do that for me. You know,
no.
I keep
No.
being like that dog that jumps under the bed during a thunderstorm.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
have a frontal lobe. I'm not crazy. I know that it's a stupid reaction, but that's my reaction. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And so, do we know, like, or are you familiar with, like, what are the mechanisms that help from psychedelics essentially give you a sense of timeline? Because that's such an interesting tagline of psychedelics, like restoring your timeline.
Yeah, I have not heard anybody else say that
Yeah,
in the psychedelic world, and that. Uh, but I think very few people who do psychedelic therapies would disagree with that.
absolutely.
Uh, and like people like Robin Carhart Harris, who probably has done more neuroscience research in psychedelics, uh, he has not arrived at that point. He has
Mm,
other ways of explaining it that are also very profound. But I'm more of a clinician than he is, so I
yeah.
see more in my office, and I'm most impressed with the brain itself come to the conclusion. Doesn't come from me.
hmm
Nothing to do with it. I'm in
hmm
a very safe place. and help people to feel more or less safe as they visit their trauma. And then their own brain comes to the conclusion, oh yeah, it was awful.
Mm.
Was awful.
Hmm.
Or that poor kid, myself, who had to go through it. And it's interesting how self-pity seems to be a very important component of overcoming your trauma. To
Hmm.
feel compassion for that traumatized self,
Hmm.
so hurt and was so helpless back then. And
Yeah.
then to realize, boy, if this would happen to me today, I'd kick them in the ass.
Yeah.
But then I couldn't do anything. Huh? So
Yeah.
people themselves created, that's probably have to do with, I think it's located in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, but I don't, at this point, we don't really know yet.
Mm. Mm.
But after this interview is over, I'm going to go to my favorite deep AI program and I'll see what do we know about psychedelics changing your timeline. And I'm sure other people besides me have talked about it. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think we might have talked about it once too.
No, but
That was,
they've studied it more
yeah,
carefully.
the research I haven't seen, but certainly the phenomenological research
Yeah.
of is very clear. I mean, I would say like the taglines of restoring the timeline, but also like I think about Martin Buber, like returning of I, thou, and we,
Yeah.
too, that
Yeah. Yeah.
happens, where it's like the witness, and also like the sense of like I can be both a witness and an experiencer again.
That's very sympathetic language. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and
And observing self. And that's, uh,
yeah.
I did the first study on Prozac and Zoloft for PTSD, and
Oh.
uh, they were not all that good.
No.
But what our research shows is that they allow people to observe themselves.
Yeah. The Prozac did?
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
No, very, very. I I wrote about it in the book. I did not publish that article back then. I
Oh,
had
okay. That's why. Yeah.
the data, and several times in my career, you get busy with other things, and several times I say, "Boy, I wish I had published this data back then."
Mm.
But now it's 30 years ago. There's research, so it's a little late to do that now. Um, but uh, yeah, you get that sense of
Yeah.
passion. Yeah,
No, where do you feel like there's been a lot of articles on or research on fluoxetine, Prozac, uh, in terms of that 50% of the results are placebo anyways, for in terms of at least depression. I don't know about PTSD in terms of that, but
well,
I'm
we had a placebo group
yeah,
always, and the placebo group did not do nearly as well as Prozac.
interesting. In terms of that sense of restoring the witness.
In our first studies on Prozac, then later on I did a study comparing eMDR with Prozac and placebo, and there was not much of a difference between Prozac and placebo actually. So
Interesting.
of the two studies or three studies I've done about this, uh, the substance was better than placebo alone.
Mm, mm. I think what I feel like we're getting into, and I really appreciate it a lot, is like as we flesh out these sort of taglines of like restoring the timeline, restoring the witness and the experiencer, the or restoring the sense of I, thou, or and we.
Yeah,
Um, and there's something about to go back to EMDR that I'm thinking about, which is like restoring back uh, sort of these floating pieces of memory to an experience, um, and and helping them find. Well, you said integration, but helping them find each other again.
yeah, yeah,
And I'm just really appreciating how each of these sort of trauma focused methodologies right now have their own um, support or component to the gestalt of healing, as opposed
yeah,
to it being like one thing like psychedelics is it, or EMDR is it, or
yeah.
somatics is it. And I think that's so important for us to really say.
Oh, absolutely. That's a, I mean, that's the curse of our field. How
Yeah.
that people become religious about their techniques.
So fucking dogmatic.
No, but listen, so I'm an EMDR therapist.
Yeah.
Oh, and I look, well, that's a great tool.
Yeah.
It's like being a carpenter and having a hammer. Very important tool.
Totally.
Hire a hammer carpenter. Also want to have a guy who knows the house saw, knows how to climb ladders, and knows how to all kind of other things. And so it is a great technique. But people, we all need many different sources of input. But I
Yeah.
see it in the psychedelic world also. And
Yeah.
we have this great results with psychedelics, and people say, "So I want to do prolonged exposure and psychedelics." Say, why would you do prolonged exposure? Why don't you just learn what psychedelic drugs can do for you? And then if you have a particular bias in terms of good techniques, because you happen to learn that technique,
Yeah.
as opposed to you would have learned that technique if you go to UPenn, but if you come to my place, you will learn some other techniques. And
Yeah.
what technique is better? We don't know. Is Freudian psychoanalysis better than Jungian psychoanalysis? It's a religious question.